The mob went back downstairs and returned to the lobby, sitting back down at the long table. Shilian peeked through the hole Huacheng had created. I'll go have the kitchens redo your orders right away, the attendant said. Please wait just a bit longer, my lords. Wait! Take the waters away, too! Wash your cups properly before serving us. Of course, of course! The attendant left with a face full of smiles. He was probably headed for the kitchen. When they were still outside, Shilian had noticed that the kitchen was located behind the building, so he picked up Huacheng and flipped out of the window to land outside the inn. As he circled to the back, he grabbed a few small pebbles and clutched them in his hand in case he needed to use them later. He skulked to a spot outside the kitchen. Huacheng poked again, and a small hole silently materialized, as if the wall were made of tofu. Shilian pressed close, peering inside to see just what kind of person ran this shady establishment. The light from the kitchen was dim. Only a few dying lamps were lit, and there was no one in sight. But if he listened carefully, he could hear the sound of crunching coming from one corner. Shilian changed his viewing angle a few times, until he finally discovered that the sound was coming from below the stove. His vision was blocked by the stove itself, but there was a human leg flung atop the brick stovetop. Its owner was obviously already dead, but the limb was still twitching in time to the sound of someone munching and savoring their meal. Several attendants entered the kitchen. My king! A disheveled, grimy man abruptly raised his head from behind the stovetops. What? He replied blearily, his voice muffled by what he was chewing. The man's lips were covered with fresh blood, and his eyes gleamed with a greedy glow. A human hand dangled from his mouth, as if it were a chicken foot. His expression and appearance were as horrifying as his identity was obvious. It was the man Chirong was currently possessing. He slurped the hand's uneaten fingers into his stuffed cheeks. A moment later, he spat out a few bones right at the attendants' faces. You useless trash! Born from a pile of shit! He cursed. Coming in here to cry like you're at a funeral, and here I thought you were bringing this ancestor food. Well, where are the humans? Where's the meat? Didn't I already give you that poison? Why are they still standing? The person lying dead on the ground, and currently being munched on, was likely either the original owner of this establishment or some other traveler who had passed by. The attendants were aggrieved. My king, it's not that we're useless. Those monks and cultivators are all picky sons of bitches. They're making everything difficult. First they complained that the plates were too greasy, then they complained that there was hair in the dishes. They refused to eat anything we're serving. Chirong chewed, crunched, and then sucked on the remains of the blood from those 10 fingers. What? What the fuck? This ancestor will personally cook them in an execution meal. They should already be crying tears of joy for not being forced to kneel and lick their food off the ground. Who gave those fuckfaces the right to complain about anything? They should try eating what cousin Crown Prince makes. That shit's worse than shit. Those fuckers should know to grovel before this ancestor in gratitude. Shilian was speechless. Gaga, don't pay any mind to what such useless trash say. Huacheng comforted. Yeah. Chirong leapt to his feet and erupted into a string of curses as he beat the attendants. It's 'cause you're all useless trash! Can't even wash a plate right! His anger satisfied, Chirong rolled up his sleeves and wiped his blood-covered lips clean with one hand. Cursing and griping all the while, he took up a spatula and immediately beat it against an iron wok, producing a noisy riot of clinking and clanking. One more time! Open your shitty eyes, I'll let you witness his ancestor's skills! We'll see if any of you have any more crap to say after this! Flames roared to the skies, and he swiftly remade a full spread of dishes and ordered the attendants to carry them out. And what a spread indeed. The meat was abundant, and the vegetables fresh. The dishes were aromatic and alluring. Shilian returned to the guest room on the second floor and peeked below. The monks and cultivators were in awe. This looks good. Yeah, this is so well done. Especially those salt and pepper chicken feet. So fat and tender. Though perhaps a little too fat and tender. I've never seen chicken feet with such long digits. Oh, this is our house specialty. They're not your typical chicken feet. They're the finest specially selected feet. They're the finest specially selected feet sourced exclusively from the rare white phoenix chicken, the attendants explained. With their claws removed, don't they look tempting? Just like the soft, delicate hands of a young woman. You're right. But I'm most excited for this fried pigskin. It looks lightly crispy and tender, and the fire was controlled just right. Wait, why did the pork have tattoos? Oh, it's because our chef wanted to demonstrate his godly carving skills, the attendant explained. He initially etched that on to show off a bit, that's all. The sweet and sour ribs don't seem to cook through, and the sauce is too thick. You're not trying to cover up anything funny with the flavor, are you? Oh, nothing of the sort, the attendants explained. Everything in this establishment is butchered on the day of and sold fresh. It's just that our chef has a taste for stronger flavors, that's all. Seeing how they were endlessly praising the dishes and were ready to dig in, Shilian really couldn't continue to stand by. He flung one of the pebbles he'd picked up earlier out of the small hole. His shot hit the hand Heaven's Eye was using to raise his cup, which was filled with water for his continued pursuit of detoxing. His arm shuddered, and causing water to spill from the cup and splash right onto a smiling attendant's face. While the liquid wasn't hot, it was like he'd poured boiling water on the attendant. The attendant covered his face, wailing, "Ah!" Everyone at the table brandished their weapons in shock. "What's going on?" Heaven's Eye seized the attendant's hand and yanked it aside, and the crowd gasped. The attendant's facial features were half melted, as if water had spilled onto a sheet of paper in blotted ink. Blurry, hazy trails of ink spread along his cheeks and rolled down. The attendant's facial features and ever-present smile had been drawn on with a brush. Without missing a beat, the mob flipped the table and started a brawl. The attendants hugged their heads in defense as they were beaten. "My lords, please stop!" they howled. That very strange woman with the small child you're looking for. The strange cultivator, he's upstairs. They're right upstairs. Go find them. Let's go. We're only part-timers." "Bah, part-timers? Who are you kidding? Trying to deceive us? Think we're that easy to fool? It's too late now. We're not lying. It's true," the attendants cried miserably. The brawl downstairs was getting wild, and seeing that the masters had an overwhelming upper hand, Shilian shook his head and left them to it. He was about to make his move to capture Lancheng and the fetus spirit amidst the chaos, but before he could even open the door to his guest room, an unexpected shriek came from the hallway. The terrified voice of Lancheng rang out. "No, I beg you, I don't want to go, please, I beg you, let us go, I'll kneel and kowtow." "Who cares about you prostrating?" said the angry voice of a young man. "If you leave, then what can my general do?" "Fuck, you two really did him in this time. Enough useless talk, you're coming with me." Upon hearing that voice, Shilian flung the door open. "It's you!" A black-clad youth stood in the long hallway blocking Lancheng's path, his expression dark. He looked up the moment Shilian emerged, clearly flabbergasted. "It's you?" Shilian walked outside his room. "Fuyao, why are you here?" Lancheng saw him and widened her eyes. "The Crown Prince?" Fuyao looked him up and down. His lips twitched, but at least his eyes didn't roll. "Why are you here?" Shilian glanced down at himself and hurriedly stripped off the woman's clothing he was wearing. "It's a long story." Just then, Fuyao noticed Huacheng standing by Shilian's side, and his pupils shrank. "You!" he cried in spite of himself. Huacheng sneered and ignored him. As for Lancheng, she turned to bolt the moment she saw him. Fuyao noticed and whirled around. "Stop right there!" He hadn't taken a single step before a long, white silk band shot out and wrapped around her ankle. Lancheng tumbled to the ground, but she immediately flipped onto her back, hugging her belly. It would seem that the fetus spirit was hidden in her stomach again. "If you wanted her to stop, you should have done this. Just shouting about it is pointless," Shilian said as he reeled Julia in. "By the way, you were talking about your general earlier. What happened to him?" Fuyao didn't respond. He simply humped and stormed over to seize Lancheng's arm. He seemed truly furious. Not only did he forcefully grab a woman with a hard, unforgiving hand, but he had even uttered a profanity earlier. This was not at all the Fuyao they knew. Unexpectedly, before he managed to pull Lancheng up, her belly swelled up like a balloon. A white figure shot out and lunged at Fuyao's face, shrieking. It was the fetus spirit. Every time it returned to its mother's womb, it recovered enough energy for another round of mayhem. Thus, its strike was ferocious and treacherous, and Fuyao had to focus to beat it back. With a swift smack of his hand, the fetus spirit was slapped away like a ball. It hit a nearby wall with a bang, then ricocheted off and shot towards Shilian. "Catch it! Don't let it run away!" Fuyao shouted. Before Shilian had even moved, Huacheng was already there in front of him to act as a shield. The fetus ball abruptly halted in front of him, then changed trajectory to charge at Fuyao once again. The ghost ball ricocheted and rampaged about the upstairs corridor. Complete chaos also reigned down below. From the first floor, they could hear cries of the attendants begging for mercy. "My lord cultivators, please be magnanimous. We lowly ones we're only doing this for a bite to eat. Yeah, we won't do it again. Truth be told, we normally only steal chickens to eat at most. We only did this because that green lord forced us to be his underlings. He's in the kitchen right now." Seeing that the situation had fallen into complete chaos, Shilian suddenly remembered something and leapt out to the second-floor window. Qirong sat in the kitchen with his legs crossed, picking at his teeth as he cheerfully waited for his meal to serve itself. A loud rumbling sound shook the room. Then someone kicked down the wall and leapt into the kitchen. "Qirong, where's Guzi?" This classic martial god entrance shocked Qirong to his feet. "You! Why are you here? Can't you knock like a normal person?" Without missing a beat, Shilian went over and smacked Qirong's head onto the chopping board, then pinned him down hard like he was a duck to be butchered. "Cut the nonsense! What did you do to the child?" Qirong grinned, a smile full of teeth. "Look, isn't he right here all over the ground?" What was the ground littered with? Human bones. Fury blazed in Shilian, and he squeezed harder. Qirong started wailing and howling. "Ow, ow, ow, ow! Arm! My arm's broken! Broken, Cousin Crown Prince, wait! Okay, I'll be honest, I lied. I didn't eat him, I didn't. I was gonna, but I haven't yet. Where is he now? Shilian demanded. Stop crushing, I'll tell you. That excess baggage is locked up in the firewood shed right there. Just take a look and you'll see. Shilian ordered Rolia to bind Chirong. Then he opened a small door on the side of the kitchen. Sure enough, Guzi was curled up inside. Shilian reached out under his nose to check his breathing. It was steady, and his face was red and flushed. He looked like he was sound asleep. However, when Shilian lifted the boy, he could feel that the small child was feverishly hot to the touch. No, Shilian thought. By that point, the monks and cultivators had poured into the kitchen as well. The moment they entered, they nearly tripped on the pile of human bones on the floor. It was a shocking sight, and they cried out in alarm. Huh? What a shady establishment! So all those dishes, they were all made of human flesh? I told you that I've never seen chicken feet that long! There was another loud rumbling noise, and a new hole was punched through the ceiling. A white ball came crashing down. What's that? The mob cried. Soon after, Fuyao jumped down through the hole as well, hurling out over a dozen yellow talisman with a swing of his hand. Get lost! Don't get in the way of my work! He yelled. It's the skilled master! The mob cried. Lan Shang dragged herself over and rolled through the hole too. Stop hitting him! What? A woman! The mob cried again. Yellow talisman shot everywhere like iron needles, like flying blades. While Shilian dodged by just slightly shifting his body, Ichirong couldn't get away, and all of the talisman thudded squarely into his back. Ghost murder! He wailed pathetically. The mob swarmed over and gathered around him to examine the talisman, gaping in awe. Wow, what incredible aim! The once perfectly serviceable kitchen was suddenly horribly crowded, cramped, and clamorous. Fuyao was chasing the leaping and dodging fetus spirit, and Lan Shang was chasing Fuyao as if she'd gone mad. Half of Chirong's face had been crushed out of shape by Chilian pressing him to the chopping board, and his back had turned into a target for the talisman Fuyao hurled while the crowd watched. Lan Shang would even occasionally step on Chirong in the heat of her chase. Why? Why are there so many people? Chirong lamented. Who are you? And who are you? Is no one gonna let me fucking eat? Why is it always like this no matter where I go? What do y'all have against me? As he wailed, his eyes spun, and he saw through the collapsed wall of the kitchen to the yard outside. Huacheng was out there, looking like he hadn't noticed the mayhem inside. He sat calmly under a tree, relaxed and idle enough that he'd built a gold foil palace. Who knew how long he'd been playing around, bored out of his mind? He had already constructed a sumptuous little mansion from over a dozen sheets of gold foil. Chirong instantly changed his tune. Everyone look outside, quick! Crimson Rain Sunflower turned into a ghost brat! He yelled at the top of his lungs. If you hold a grudge against him, go now! Don't miss this chance! If you pass this up, you won't get another shot! Before he could finish, a cold, glistening, bloody butcher knife was thrust between his teeth. Shilian's hand was gripping the knife's handle. Shilian smiled. What were you yelling about? Chirong did not see how Shilian had managed to thrust the knife into his mouth so swiftly. He had only felt a sudden chill on his lips before realizing there was a new and extremely sharp object present on the tip of his tongue. Although he was unharmed as of yet, blood would flood his mouth if he tried moving the slightest bit. His voice died in his throat. However, the crowd had already seen Huacheng stacking the golden foil palace in the yard outside the inn. Is that him? Probably! With Guzi in one arm and pulling Rolia with the other, Shilian dashed outside to get there before the rest of them. Chirong was still bound by Rolia, and he shrieked as he was dragged along the ground. Dog-fucked Shilian, you must be doing this on purpose! I've never seen anyone as evil as you fake white lotus! Ha ha! The mob gathered around. Do we charge? Watch out for traps. How about we observe first? In the meantime, Huacheng had finished building the little golden foil palace and risen to his feet. He arched an eyebrow as he looked condescendingly down at the building he'd constructed, and then he gave a gentle kick. Flop, flop, flop. The golden palace collapsed, as the inn crumbled as well, rumbling as it did. The spell was broken. Shilian turned back and looked. Behind him was no inn, but rather a collapsed little cottage, the type of building that was a normal sight in barren hills like these. The inn was only an illusion. The crowd of monks and cultivators hadn't yet decided whether to charge out, so they were crushed by the collapsing roof and knocked unconscious by rotten logs and ragged straw. Shilian jogged to Huacheng's side. Sanlang, won't using your power like this affect you? Huacheng gave an effortless wave, and the gold foil disappeared into thin air. Don't worry, Gaga. Something small like this is no bother. A piece of broken roof moved, and Fuyao's head poked out. He shoved a pile of hay away, exclaiming angrily, You're not bothered, but I am! Just moments before, he had finally captured the fetus spirit, but his vision suddenly went dark. When he looked up, the dilapidated roof was splitting and caving in, crumbling right on top of him. What a disaster. Fu Yao plucked up a bunch of straw from his hair and stomped over to Xilian and Huacheng. He glared at Huacheng, who was shorter than him at present. You did this on purpose, he raged. Huacheng blinked. He neither rebuffed nor taunted him. He only raised his inky black eyes to look at Xilian. Xilian immediately grasped Huacheng's shoulder to push him behind his own body. No, surely not. Kids don't know how to control their strength. Sorry about that, Fu Yao. Fu Yao's hair was a frightful mess. He stared at Xilian in disbelief. Kids? Your Highness, do you really think I'm blind enough not to recognize who that is? What are you talking about? Xilian replied, sounding puzzled. This is just a very normal little boy. Fu Yao stared at Huacheng and narrowed his eyes. Behind them came faint creaking sounds. Lancheng had also pushed away a chunk of roof and crawled out, and Fu Yao turned to walk over. Xilian sighed a breath of relief. He settled Guzi on the ground, but somewhere a hesitant voice sounded by his ear as he was doing so. Your Highness? Xilian straightened up at once. Fengshen? It was indeed Fengshen on the other end. It sounded like he was sighing in relief. Thank goodness you haven't changed your verbal password. Xilian gave a dry, soundless laugh. 800 years ago, when he activated his verbal password for the first time, it was just recite the Tao Te Ching 1,000 times. He'd never changed it. Even centuries later, and Fengshen actually remembered what it was. Xilian recalled the way Fengshen had laughed until he was hoarse when he first heard the verbal password all those years back, and he couldn't help but feel nostalgic, even though it was hardly the right time. Yes, it hasn't changed. How are things in the upper court? Has the Heavenly Emperor been informed of the matter with Lingwen? Huacheng could tell what he was talking to an upper court official, and conscientiously stepped away, placing his hands on Guzi's forehead to check for a fever. Fengshen's voice grew serious. Things aren't good. And yes, he knows. The entire upper court is in chaos right now. Xilian sighed. Lingwen has always handled coordination and management of the upper court affairs, so there's no helping that. Can't any other civil gods take her place? They've tried, but they're not effective, Fengshen said. Usually they're the first to scorn the palace of Lingwen. Like they could do the job 10 times better if they had the chance. But now that we actually need them to take up the task, not a single one can do even half of what she does. Just organizing news and information completely overwhelmed them. A number of civil gods have already dropped out and refused to help any further. Xilian shook his head. And it's not just Lingwen, Fengshen continued. Something happened with Muqing too. He was detained at first, but he attacked and injured the official who was guarding him and escaped. What? On hearing this, Xilian jolted, then immediately looked at Fu Yao on impulse. The black-clad youth was saying something to Lancheng, and while there was displeasure on his face, the disquiet was more obvious. Xilian walked further away and hushed his voice. What happened to Muqing? How did it come like that? It isn't just that he was locked up. The entire palace of Xuanzhen has been suspended pending investigation, Fengshen replied. It's all because of the fetus spirit. Xilian suppressed his voice further. What happened with the fetus spirit? Is he really involved in that case? Yes, Fengshen said. Muqing was responsible for apprehending the female ghost Lancheng and the fetus spirit, as they were among the nefarious creatures that escaped. But he didn't manage to capture them. He let them get away. During the pursuit, the fetus spirit recognized Muqing. It said Muqing was the one who carved it from its mother's womb and molded it into a little ghost. That's impossible, Xilian blurted. No way, even though Muqing is someone who's... Well, he surely had no reason to do something like that. Who knows, Fengshen said. But apparently there's an evil cultivation method to accelerate ascension, which involves the use of dead babies. Now many of us are suspicious of the legitimacy of his ascension, so they detained him so that they could take their time in thoroughly investigating all his past actions. Who knew he couldn't keep his cool, or that he'd bolt like this? Now everyone believes he's guilty and went on the run because of it. Wait, Xilian said. This really isn't right. If Muqing was the perpetrator, then why didn't the fetus spirit and Lancheng recognize him at the Palace of Divine Might? Why did they only accuse him while trying to avoid capture? It's very obviously slander, is it not? By the time I found out, things had already gotten bad, so I'm not sure what really happened, Fengshen said. It seems Lancheng and the fetus spirit didn't know the identity of the one who performed the evil ritual, but the fetus spirit had a random moment of clarity while it was being molded. In that instant, it broke free of the spellcaster's control and bit their arm. When the fetus spirit was fighting with Muqing, it happened to see there was also a bite scar on his arm, and it was centuries old. Did the bite mark match the fetus spirit's teeth? Xilian asked. It was an exact match, Fengshen replied. And how did Muqing explain this? Xilian asked, brow furrowed in contemplation. He admitted that he'd seen the fetus spirit before, Fengshen said, but he doesn't admit to being the perpetrator. He says that he saved the fetus spirit out of benevolence and it bit him in the process. He might as well have not tried to explain anything with a confession like that. That was quite true. As far as everyone else was concerned, Muqing would never do anything of the sort. He was hardly considered the type to help another out of the kindness of his heart, protect and cherish children, or perform anonymous good deeds. Muching had always been a loner. He never showed any kindness that wasn't strictly required of him, and didn't have any intimate friends in the heavens. Now that something like this had happened, no one would believe him even if he tried to argue, and naturally there was no one to speak on his behalf. This was probably why he chose to run away and investigate the truth himself. In any case, things are still out of control up here, Your Highness, Fengshen said. Where are you right now? The Heavenly Emperor said the gathering of ghosts probably can't be stopped at this point. Hurry back to join the emergency assembly. I'm currently, Shilian started. Before he could continue, Fuyao's cold voice sounded from behind him. Who are you talking to? And that's 74.